Recently, I've had some people send me emails saying that this plane, you know, didn't look quite the same as theirs, and I thought that might make a lot of people that own a Chinook wondering what the heck this thing is. But what it is I've changed it. I've modified it. So I thought maybe I'd start at the nose and work my way back and show you some things I modified that possibly make it look different to you. One of the things I did was to take a winter pitot tube from a winter airspeed indicator, and I mounted this here with a little plate that clamps it with, well, there's actually just 4 screws here that I take out. If I can show you what it is. You can see the bend, how I bent it to get this facing straight ahead when the plane's flying what I think is level anyway. And then the rubber tube goes through the Lexan here inside to the airspeed indicator with T-fitting to take it to the rear seat. If I put an airspeed indicator in the rear seat, there's a T-fitting. But anyways, the other thing I was going to show you that makes it look different is you'll notice it's rounded off here. Most Chinooks come out and they're kind of squared off. This piece here starts at narrow at the top and keeps getting wider as it comes down to the front. And the reason that I changed that and rounded it off like this, and I also changed the curve on the front end, is if you took this thing and pulled back the power and just put it in a glide, it would be fine unless for some reason you picked up speed or you hit a little turbulence or something that pushed the nose down. Then it would pick up speed and go faster and faster, and if nobody grabbed that stick, it just keep going faster and faster. So what I did is I rounded it off so I could keep these 2 tubes the same parallel width to here, and I made these the floor tube and this tube here at the sides, just put a curve in it. And then I always bugged me that cleaning up in here was so hard to do. And if you wanted to adjust the rudder pedals, which you have to do with little screws you have to take out, aircraft nut and bolt you take out to move it to a different position for the rudder pedal. And if you wanted to adjust that, that's pretty hard to get at with the Lexan on here. So this way, I put a piece of piano hinge on a piece I put across here, and the piano hinge, it's just riveted on there and lets it open up like that, so that I can get to everything in here. I can get to my wires and so forth real easy. And the way that I made this curve around here was with what they call a tubing roll. It's like sheet metal rolls, except for it has a radius cut in the rollers for the diameter of tubing you want to bend. And you know, I'd mark a spot in the middle and keep rolling it back and forth until I got the radius that I wanted, and I could measure across, you know, with a tape measure or ruler or something, when I had the width that I wanted. So I also made this cabin a little bit narrower than what the Chinook has to start with. It had a really wide cabin. It was wider than I even needed. I mean, this could really take a big guy could ride in this. It's got a lot of room in there. And so, anyways, that's what I did. I just rolled it, made it rounded off the front end a little bit. And because of the fact it would want to nose down, if you put it in a glide, it would go lower all the time. I decided that this was acting as a rudder in the front, or an elevator, I should say, an elevator in the front. And air hitting it was pushing the nose down, so the faster you went, the more nose down you got. Well, that's not self-correcting. I didn't like that idea. So I bent these floor tubes and bent them up so it's got a little bit more curve up to it. My feeder in there is a little bit higher than it would be in a stock Chinook. So it's a little bit higher, and therefore this piece serves to have air hitting this and kind of hold the nose up for you. The faster you go, the more pressure you'll have on this piece. And of course this piece is wider than this piece, and hopefully the two pressures keep me pretty level when I'm in a glide. So that was the reason for that. Fastened with aircraft screws here. And like I use these trailer plugs everywhere for wire, so I can unplug this 4 screws and that whole panel lifts out of there. I can work on the instruments and things like that. And comes in handy. I probably will want to clean this windshield a little bit here too. The other thing you might notice is the gear is different. This gear, this lower tube, this axle tube going across, is a copy of one out of a Birdman Chinook. And I did that because I thought it was quite a bit more difficult to land with the front end jacked up in the air so high. Also, I didn't care too much for the big tube that they had here as a drag link, so I put a smaller one on. I don't know if that'll give me less air resistance, but that was the idea of that. And but by lowering the front end like this, it makes it a lot easier to get in and out of the plane, but mostly I think it's easier to land. Now I'll show you one other thing that I think is probably something people would notice. Back here, you'll notice this, I don't know what they call it, longeron, I guess. This tube here, it takes some thrust from the landing gear back this way, and you'll notice there's a bend in it here. And I moved this out, it sticks out maybe a couple inches more than the stock one would, because the passengers that sat in the back seat, the way they had made it originally, it was so narrow a normal sized human being couldn't sit in there without his shoulders sticking out. So by making this a bit wider and making these a little bit wider, this is made out of metal. I didn't cover that with fabric, that's metal on there. But you can see that the throttle is pretty far away from the door here. And anyways, when I bent this like this, of course that's going to be weaker because that's transferring the motion back here, and all the forces go that way. So there's a small piece of aluminum that goes straight across to the one on the other side as a sort of anti-spreader, and it's riveted in there to prevent this tube from wanting to bend right here, to keep it from wanting to spread wider right here, because this is where it would bend more. Where you put that bend in it, it's going to bend more, and therefore I needed something to kind of brace that. So that's probably the major things that somebody want to see that makes it look different. I didn't use the I used to have it on there, but when I made this wider, I put this as just a piece of plastic on here. This is fabric here, but that I used to cover everything up with. The landing gear had 5/8 inch axles like all ultralights do, and so I made some 3/4 inch axles, and they're tool steel so they won't bend, and I machined them off so they don't stick out too far here too. But this hole on the end is, I don't know, it's just a, maybe could be just in case hole, where I might need it for something. It's tapped, but I'm not going to put wheel pants on it or anything. But by making it 3/4 inch and making it out of tool steel, it will not bend. And the other thing I did, as you can see, what they gave you for bungees with this thing, this is an ASAP manufactured kit. This was, they had real small bungee cord in them. These are just like big rubber O-rings that fit a Taylorcraft landing gear, and I stretched them around with a tire iron, winding it around with a tire iron, and just pry it around and hook it on there. That's a lot stronger, and it definitely holds my weight and a passenger's weight. I don't want these landing gear to move, because if they do, if it works like the suspension of a car, there's no damping on this rubber. It's just like a pogo stick, and it's real hard to land because it's always going to want to bounce on you. So I want these rubber things on here, but I only want them to move if I hit too hard. Then they're supposed to move. This piece here, I got rid of the tubing that they had. I just copied the tube that came with the kit, and this is a piece of what they call Jigging fixture plate. It's aluminum. I painted it black, but it's aluminum. And what that does is it gives me a more rigid axle like that won't bend. It can't bend. The aluminum won't bend. Its mode of failure is going to be to break it. If you hit hard enough to do anything with it, you'd have to break it. It ain't going to just bend. And so the only other modification I thought I might do to this sometime is this piece here could be made maybe with an eccentric, so you could turn it and adjust your toe in and toe out on the wheels and stuff. But that's probably carrying things too far. And the other thing is, this piece is 4130. That's no longer aluminum. It's 4130 steel. This piece is 4130 down here. That's 4130. And let's see, I think the cross piece behind the seat, this piece right here goes across that way. That's 4130. You get a lot more strength, and geez, it's not much more weight than the aluminum tube they had on there. When you get it out and start measuring it, and you find out, well, that's not much difference. I'd rather have the strength than the very minor lack of weight. So anyways, that's what that's all about, and that's why that gear looks so different and why it sits low in the front end. The wheel here, the wheel itself, because I couldn't get another one, can't get those Kenda tires. I guess they were made in Taiwan and they're outlawed now or something. So even ASAP could not get me another tail wheel for it. So I put in this one, which fits a Razor scooter. You know, little scooters the kids ride around. They're electric, I think. It's a plastic wheel, but a nice air-filled tire, and it works real well, and it's big enough diameter to suit me. What ASAP sent me to replace the tail wheel was too small. It would have made the back end drag even lower, and it was jacked up enough in the front end as it was. This piece here is just a block of aluminum that I machined at an angle so it slopes backward, and I turned it to this diameter here, which I think is like about a 4-inch tube here, but it fits inside there. You'll see a screw right here that holds it on, and that thing there puts this shaft at a proper caster angle so that this wheel wants to self-steer and it wants to go straight rather than crooked, because with what ASAP sent you, it was hooked on the bottom of this, which is the end of the rudder right here, and that thing is sloping the wrong direction, and of course it made the thing inherently unstable. It wanted to go everywhere but straight. And the way I determined that there was really something wrong with that geometry, I taxied down a taxiway with a stripe painted in the center and tried to see if I could keep that directly under the, you know, going down the front of the aircraft, taxiing. Well, when I get up to 20 mile an hour, I'm zigzagging back and forth so much and dancing on them rudder pedals so much. That's as fast as I could go and keep it on the taxiway. You simply couldn't steer it that precise with the way that unstable tail wheel was. So I came up with this idea, and this is just a couple of blocks that are, again, they're cut in half with a hole bored in the center that's a little smaller than this tube that it pivots on here, and the bearings that it pivots on and everything are in here, but it's longer. You'll notice this little extension I put in there, which makes the tail stick up a little further. And the reason for that is to try to keep it out of the weeds so much. You know, when I land in a field that hadn't been mowed or something like that, I want to have a lot of clearance, and so I jacked it up a little bit in the back end, and I think that makes it a little easier to land. I can come in a little faster and still set it down okay. I don't have to quite go so slow to get it to land, because I don't need such a horrendous angle of attack, because it sets up a little higher in the back end. I can change this tube. I can take it out and just put another tube in there, or saw this one off if I want. to lower it down. Maybe I got a couple inches here, I could lower the tail end of the thing. But I kind of like it just where I got it, right there. That works good for me. The other thing I changed back here, of course, was these control arms are a little longer than what was on there originally. They had a little short thing on there that could possibly go over center, and then these springs would wrap right around it, and then you were locked up. So I didn't think too much of their setup, and so that's why I changed this. This angle that I put on here is nothing precise. I just wanted to make sure I had a angle on it a little bit. So I just put it in the chuck jaws in the lathe and kind of cocked it at an angle. And I can't tell you how much it's off, but I'd say it's about 1/4 of an inch from one side to the other in there cattywampus. And then I just turned a little step register and put it on there. And these holes I drilled and tapped in there are what's holding that block in there. The knee screws, these little saddles clamp this business together. That was all there was to that. So that's something that probably looks different and makes it look different the way it's set.